Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Alex's Afternoon Art Show. Today we are drawing Cable, and I think I'm going to be talking a little bit about proportioning today because one of the things which I want to do, now a few episodes ago, or a few weeks ago at this point, I talked about kind of doing some over-the-top proportions, sort of the triangle body, as I call it, of where it's all upper body and then you get some thinner legs, and everything starts out really broad and then thins out as it goes down. You sort of get that. That's sort of what you might get in terms of like that's the sort of like Bruce Timm animation style, is the triangle body of where it's all on top and then everything gets thinner on the bottom. That's sort of what I'm going to be sort of doing with Cable here today, because Cable is sort of typically proportioned as being pretty enormous, and so yeah, he's typically pretty huge on the upper body, and then that sort of tapers down a little bit as things go down. So that's sort of what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to have a little bit of background stuff to do as well, some painted stuff which I'm going to be doing with the background. I'm going to do some swirls and things like that, so it's not going to be anything too crazy, but you'll see what I mean whenever I'm doing that stuff later. Another thing which I'm going to have to talk about as well is some detailing stuff, because I've got to do some guns. I got to draw guns in this because we're doing Cable. So I'm going to have to draw a ridiculous cartoonish sci-fi gun, which is mostly just a set of boxes on just a line. So yeah, you'll see that in a minute whenever I show you what I've got, which would be about right now. So I'm going to roll the intro and then yeah, show you what I have. Okay, like I said, triangle body. He's all upper body, so his head is a thing which you can very easily do to make a character seem a lot bigger, is to make their head smaller. So one of the things which I did whenever I was doing all my basic stuff was I made his head a little bit smaller, and then I obviously made his shoulders pretty huge, and then he's got these enormous arms and all this stuff. So yeah, that sort of helps in terms of making a character seem a lot broader. A lot bigger is making their head smaller. There's just a little trick that you can use. And so then, obviously, so we've got the gun. That's the other big one, is this enormous gun. So this little note here is just the rotation, which I'll need to put the canvas at in order to get a straight line properly on that. It's nothing I have to worry about for right now, but yeah, again, another thing which I've mentioned before, trigger discipline. Have your characters practice trigger discipline. It makes it look like they know what they're doing with a gun. So that's what I've done here, is his finger is not on the trigger. And yeah, as I say, his gun is mostly just a set of boxes on a line. And it's very big. It's a very big kind of probably useless gun that most likely shoots some sort of lasers. But yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do in terms of the colors of it, but we'll see, I suppose. I'll get to that later. So design-wise, I've blended a few different things here for this Cable design. Some of it is the 90s design. I don't know what specifically the design is that they use in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but there's a bit of that in here, of where you can see he's got the sort of double bandoliers that strap in the middle, and that sort of then tucks down into the belt, and then he's got these two sort of leg holsters, and then this particular boot shape with the sort of square knee pad is that same design. I don't know where that design comes from originally, but that's the sort of design which I'm pulling from a little bit here. There's a plane flying overhead there for a second, which was very, very loud. But anyways, I'll get back to what I was saying. So yeah, in terms of some of the other elements, there's the shoulder pad here, which I've decided to add, which sort of comes from one of his more modern designs. I don't know the artist who made that design, or I'm not familiar with the artist who made that design. But that's the one of where it's got the big shoulder pad and then it straps in the middle, that there's a sort of X logo in the middle. So that's sort of where this element comes from. And then I chose to just have him be sleeveless on both arms, because otherwise, I mean, on the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 design, this arm would still have a sleeve, and he also wouldn't have a shoulder pad, but that's besides the point. I decided to have him be sleeveless on both arms because that's a typical element of Cable's design, is that usually he's sleeveless on both arms. Because obviously he's always going to be sleeveless on his cyber arm. So that's always worth noting. And then I always have to, I mean, if you're drawing Cable, you have to include this sort of like eye glow. It's not necessarily like a necessary part of things. You can draw him without it, but I feel like if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna make a point of including it. So yeah, I included his like sort of crazy telekinetic eye glint in here as well. And obviously there's all the scars are on this side. His hair is sort of not like thin, but very, very short is sort of how I would do this. And then he's got these little tiny bits of hair dipping down. But largely he's got very thin hair is sort of how I think of Cable's hair. And then I've given him a little bit of the 5 o'clock shadow and stuff like this. So again, largely this design is pretty simple as those things go. So a lot of I'll have to zoom back in for this. A lot of this like musculature you'll be seeing on his chest, I think some of that I might tone down, because let's put it this way, his costume isn't so tight that you should be seeing the chest crease that forms whenever you're incredibly jacked. But we'll see. I might see about maybe, I'm not sure what I'll do in turn. I was thinking of maybe doing a two-tone blue for the core costume, because obviously it's blue and yellow, as is the sort of typical X-Men colors. But yeah, I was thinking of doing a two-tone blue of where the middle tone, which obviously goes down straight all the way down in the middle, I was thinking of that being the core blue and then the outside part being a darker blue, but I'm not sure about that, because that's very similar to the design that he has towards the end of X-Men 97. Spoilers, I guess. His second design in that has that two-tone blue of where the middle tone is sort of deep blue and then the outer tones are a very dark blue. So I'm not sure. I might not do that. I might just have it all be the one color of blue, because yeah, realistically these seams are just there to add a little bit more movement to the design, because otherwise it'd be a little basic in parts. So yeah, I chose to make him like, yeah, pretty jacked. So originally, a thing which I did whenever I was proportioning this out was I made his legs a lot thinner, but I thought he looked really weird whenever he had like super thin legs. So I just decided to give him buff legs, but not as buff as the rest of his body. Again, like he is still predominantly upper body, which is also emphasized by the shoulder pad. So something which I feel like is necessary to do whenever you're drawing a character like this is to exercise a certain amount of restraint, because Cable's one of those characters who I feel is often over-designed, because, you know, there's only so many pouches a character needs. In this instance, he's got his 2 side pouches and then he's got his belt pouches, but that's it. And he's not got like 7 different shoulder pads that touch the edges of the screen, and his gun isn't just a complete square that just moves on endlessly. So yeah, I feel like it was maybe worth mentioning that. But yeah, you need to exercise some level of restraint, I think, and also maybe try and keep the chest to a human proportion and not have it be extending out like like just some sort of like obscene giant like mutant chest. No, he is a mutant, I suppose, but I don't think one of Cable's mutations is severe chest inflation. Pretty wish I didn't say that out loud. Anyways, before I say anything else which is just weird, I'm just gonna carry on. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't get that joke, I'm making a joke about the infamous Rob Liefeld Captain America cover where he's got this gigantic chest of where it's like, if I'm at this angle, it's this far out. It's insane. But yeah, to explain why it's like that is probably because back in the day a lot of people used bodybuilders as reference, and a lot of the time bodybuilders do poses. Say for example, if they do a pose like this where they're holding their arm like that, that causes the chest to flex outward. So if you're doing a pose like that and then you don't and then you obviously alter it so that the hands are down, but you don't change the proportions so the chest is still flexed out, you're going to end up with someone who has an enormous chest and it just doesn't look very human. So that's the thing. That's presumably what happened there. Chances are high that it was that, or it could just be that he's not a very good artist. Anyways, let's move on. I'll do these details and then I'll be back to do the colors. So yeah, anyways. Okay, that's our details done. So I think I made a couple. Yeah, I made a few minor adjustments with the gun and stuff like this. I sort of rounded out a few edges, and I sort of added a few more little kind of moving parts and stuff like that. There, I obviously polished up the logos because he's got 3 of them on him, so if you hadn't realized that he's a member of the X-Men, he's got 3 different X-Men logos on him. So yeah, I polished those up. I darkened his eye, but you know, I actually should probably check this beforehand. I'm pretty sure he's got brown eyes, but I actually don't remember it now that I think about it. I'm pretty sure he has brown eyes. Yeah, he's got brown eyes. Just sort of couldn't think of it there for a second. May as well leave this reference open for now, anyways. In terms of colors, anyways, make my life easier in that respect. Because yeah, there's some coloration stuff which is going to be a little bit difficult in that regard. So I'll have to think about that. But yeah, so yeah, what was I going to say now? Okay, so yeah, with I made a few of those adjustments. I was originally going to have more of the actual like muscular detailing moving through the boots, but I actually don't think that should be visible. I made the I decided to keep a lot of the musculature in the chest and in the legs and stuff like that because I just feel like it's it looks more distinct when it's there. It looks more interesting, I think, so I decided to keep it. But yeah, in terms of what we're going to be doing with our colors, so I may as well talk about that now. I'm probably going to have most of the gun be like I'll just mostly use silvers and stuff like that. It won't be too complicated. Just use silvers and all that kind of stuff. Obviously not the same silver as his arm, but I'll have to try and find some sort of thing to do with that. And then for the background, this is something which I think is worth noting, is that on the background I'm going to be doing like old time warp things, so I'll have to do some paint brushes and things for that, add some swirls and things sort of like warping out into the edges. I might include maybe some sort of little strikes of lightning kind of bursting out from behind him. Obviously sort of give that Terminator vibe, which I think is interesting. I think that'll look fun. So yeah, that's sort of the stuff I'll be doing at the background. I might use a placeholder color for now because obviously I'm going to be using lots of blues on him because his main color is blue, and then obviously the yellow is more of an accent color. So yeah, realistically speaking, I'm not going to be using a huge amount of I might use something else as a placeholder color for now, because he's quite pale, so that will be sort of important for his skin, and then obviously his hair is white, so I'll need to try and do something in terms of that. So yeah, is there anything else I needed to cover before I just continued? I don't think there's a huge amount I need to go into here. I'll have to make his telekinetic, like glint, a different color. I'll have to make that like an orangey kind of color rather than a yellow, because with yellow it'll look too similar to the, obviously there'll be yellow bits on his design. So yeah, a thing which I was considering doing was having little bits of little like lens flare marks along the arm, like 1 or 2 along the arm. That wouldn't be too difficult, but we'll see. I might do that. I could just do that with the which tool do I use? Yeah, it's the gradient tool, and it's set to this specific setting. Is how you do that. And obviously just then change the color to be white, and then that would then have a little glint along it. So we'll see how I do with that. Obviously a lot of the background stuff I'm not going to be doing until the paints. That'll all be dealt with in painting. So a lot of that stuff I don't have to worry about just now. So yeah, realistically I'm just putting in a placeholder color. For the time being I'll probably put in like a red or something like that, just to save me, just to make things stand out a little bit more. Because obviously the blue and the yellow will stand out a bit more then. From that, yeah, I'm going to try and not do a billion and one colors, because that will get a little too confusing if there's too many colors going on. The thing which would mostly cause a lot of different colors going on will be the gun. So because this is obviously such this sort of big, bulky kind of gun, which maybe would have like some little bits of light and all that stuff on it, it might have a few different colors going on, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum, just to keep things simple and to make my life a little easier. I think our lighting environment is largely going to be maybe darker on this side, Yeah. Yeah, I think darker on this side, and then because then that'll feed into our light line of the sort of like time warp stuff happening behind him. So yeah, we'll see about that. I'll maybe try and go for something like that. But yeah. Anyways, I'll move on. I'll carry on. I'll do these colors, and then I'll be back to do the painted shading. At which point I'll also do most of the background stuff as well. So yeah, yeah. I think that is time to move on to the colors. And yes, I'll be back to do the painted shading. And yeah, once I've done that, that'll be most of the work done. But anyways, I'll do these colors and I'll move on. So yeah. Okay, so that was the colours. That was a little bit more arduous than I would have expected. I decided to add an outer glow to the lights that I put on the gun. Now, that obviously here is interacting in a bit of a weird way because it's not that dissimilar a colour from the background. But because during this section we're going to be painting in the sort of time warping effects and stuff like that, that will sort of... It'll stand out a little bit more because it'll be much lighter blues against the background. Here, this is just the sort of base color that I'll be working from, then painting out from there. So yeah, a few of the things which became a bit of a pain very quickly were the fact that I sort of needed to add a couple of different colors to the gun. For example, there's three core colors here, being the black, the dark gray, and the light gray. And there's obviously the lights too, so that's the fourth color there. And then not only that, there was the fact that all the colors I had to use here were a bit awkward. For example, his skin color is very pale, because that's just sort of part of his nature, is that he's pretty pale, in a lot of the reference that I have in front of me here at least. Cable's normally kind of pale, so that was something which I chose to keep here. So because of that, it meant that trying to gauge whether or not a color was within the lines or slightly out of the lines or slightly too far into the lines was difficult. It was sort of annoying. I had to tinker with his core blue as well a few times. I decided not to do the dark blue, if only because of time, because I found that those colors were very time consuming, so I chose to trim down on some of those things just to, make my life a little easier, because the gun is going to take a long time to shade anyways. So yeah, like I said before, my darkest color is going to be over here, the lightest color is going to be over here, and then that's going to be that's obviously going to be the template for how I shade everything whenever we get to the detailed shading, which is the next section. So, because this is the painted shading, I'm going to be doing the shading on him, of course, and then I'm also going to be shading the background. Now I'm going to be going for a predominantly blue color palette, I would think. I might think about something in terms of maybe changing that later, or I might maybe do something else with that later whenever it comes to the gradient map, but whenever it comes to doing the gradient maps at the end, but I doubt that it'll be anything other than predominantly blue shades. So realistically speaking, that's kind of what we're looking at here, is mostly blue. So yeah, I think just in the interest of keeping things moving, I might just start with this painted shading and then move on, because the background is obviously going to be a bit of a time-consuming element here. I'm also going to be doing those lightning effects and stuff like that during in the background, and that'll be a thing that I do. No, I'll be doing that during the detailed shading. I'll do all those maybe like more detailed effects of the background later. That's something I don't have to worry about right now. So yeah, for now, all I've got to worry about is the painted parts, which is enough effort in and of itself. So yeah, I'm probably going to try and do that all on the one layer, the painting stuff, because you sort of want the paints to interact with each other, and they're going to interact with each other a little bit more, even digital paints. They're going to interact with each other more if they're all on the same layer. So that's why I only do one painting layer per color, of where I only want the paints to interact with this color. For example, I'll be painting the hair. I do all my paints on the one layer, because I want the light paint and the dark paint to interact, so that still has a bit of a mid-tone to it, even still. But yeah, it's something which I imagine is very noticeable as I'm doing it. Yeah, it would look kind of weird if I did it as two different painting layers. It wouldn't quite interact right. But yeah, anyways, in the interest of time, I'm just going to carry on, do this painted shading, and then I'll be back to do the detailed shading, at which point I'll have also already done most of the background. So yeah, anyways, I'll carry on, I'll do this, and I'll be back. Okay, so that is our painted shading done. We're getting there. We're getting towards the end now. All that is left is the detailed shading, the light line, and then a few of those little extra itty bitty bits, such as doing the lightning that I want to have shooting out through the background here, sparking out through the sort of time warp in the background. So I was sort of thinking about a few different ideas when it came to paintbrushes. I sort of have this smoke layer behind it, which you can't even really see. It just sort of, it's vaguely visible. I'm turning it on and off, but that's it off, that's it on. It just sort of adds a little bit of a blooming effect, slightly, I think. Because the background itself is a very what do you call it, kind of color. The background itself is a sort of kind of like a turquoisey color. So this is the thing. Whenever I add in the whenever I add in that sort of deeper blue of the sort of smoky color of the sort of smoke in the background, that sort of helps to bloom to sort of blend these things a little bit, and obviously that's a separate layer, so it doesn't necessarily blend. It's an in-between layer for the purposes of blending between the paints and the background, because otherwise they're just not really gonna gel. I fear. So that's why that's there. And so so I think it has this nice sort of like tunnel effect of where like behind him is the lightest part. That's where the sort of like proper white part of the warp is, and then that sort of just sort of then like tunnels out to the edges here, of where there's then the different layers of paint that I put over underneath, of where it's like there's a blue, and then there's a lighter blue, and then there's an almost whitey color, then there's an actual white, which I put over as like the final little bit of a wash at the end. And then I think the lightning effect that I want to have like sparking out from the background here, I'll do a little bit more for that. I might do that little lens flare thing along the arm, because otherwise I feel like his arm is going to be it almost like kind of blends in a little bit. It's not that, it doesn't draw your eye all that much, even though I went so far as to add like this almost unnatural sort of shine to it. But yeah, I feel like it sort of needs a little bit more. So I might try the lens flare thing. We're doing a lot of experiments today, I guess, especially with the sort of like time warp stuff. We're doing a lot of experiments. And yeah, especially this close to the end. But because we're already 4 hours in, which would normally be my point to call it, which would normally be the point where I'm done, but no, I've still got a little bit more to do. So yeah, as I say, I've got a little bit more to do. So we'll see what I can manage with the lens flares. We'll see what works with that. And yeah, we're already doing a lot of experiments with stuff like the all the little lights and stuff like that. But yeah, as you can see, the lights on the gun stand out a little bit more now because of the what's it called? They stand out a little bit more because of the change in background color. And what else was I going to say? There's one more thing I wanted to say. I don't know. It's probably something to do with how the tunneling effect sort of makes things look very weird. Something along those lines, probably. But yeah, I'm mostly happy with this so far. So we'll see how I feel once everything's done, because we're nearly there. So yeah, anyways, without further ado, I'll do this detailed shading and lightning and all those little effects at the end. And then we'll do the gradient maps and we'll wrap up. So yeah. Alright, that is us done basically. So yeah, I did all that lightning and everything in the background. It's subtle enough of where it sort of blends with the sort of time tunnel. I was gonna add a bit of blur to it, but I felt that made it a little too subtle. So I just left it at this. So obviously parts of the outer glow become far more visible as it goes further out to the edge, which is what you want. It's what I wanted in this instance, because again, you can sort of still see it around the middle, because it's obviously paint, so the background is predominantly paint, so the lighting isn't. So because it's a solid white line, you can still sort of see it, and because there's a soft blue glow around the edges of it, you can still sort of clearly see the edges of it around here, sort of. Again, it does still blend a little bit. It's harder to see, which again is good. In this instance, it's good that it's harder to see in the middle, because you want it to seem like it's sort of, kind of comes out in every which direction from various different parts. So yeah. Yeah, let me do these gradient maps, and then that'll basically be us. So right, what do we want to do color palette wise? I suppose while I'm talking here now, I might as well bring up the fact that there was a very weird camera glitch that happened at some point. I just had to look there to see if it had happened again. There was a very, very weird camera glitch which happened earlier on, and I'm not sure what caused it, because yeah, it was very unusual, where the camera just glitched out and then it stopped and I just had to restart the camera and it was fine. But yeah, you might have noticed it earlier on, but I don't know. Very deeply strange thing to happen. I want this to be a little bit higher contrast, I think. Let me see if I've got any good color palettes set aside which are predominantly blue in an interesting way. That's not super dark. It does have a light to dark gradient map, obviously. So right, what I might, you know what? I'll leave it for now. And then I'll change it in a minute if there's parts which I dislike. Right, that's an overlay. That's obviously a little much. Soft light is probably, yeah, that's definitely what we'll want to go with. It's funny how the yellow just totally becomes green. But I suppose that is what's going to happen. I don't want this to be intense, so I'll actually leave it at 80%. You know, I'm mostly fine with just leaving this as it is. So let's leave that at 80%. We want it to be intense. Make a duplicate of that. Oh yeah, I did that lens flare thing along the arm. I actually think it looks pretty good. I think it works here. It doesn't draw too much attention, but it does enough to make you think, oh yeah, that's right. So right, luminosity is what this one will be. This one will then be pretty low, I would say. I don't think we want our luminosity to be particularly intense. So maybe 20%. Actually, no, 15% seems a bit more appropriate. We want it to make it a little dimmer, but not like that much dimmer. Does this look better underneath or above? It's definitely lighter with it above, so I'll leave it there. Right, duplicate that. Now we're going to want this to be a color burn, and turn that down to 5%. Because it actually really draws, well, that'd be 10. That sort of intensifies the background a little bit more. It's funny how doing that now doesn't actually do a whole file. Alright, so 80% is what we're going to want this on. Right, let me zoom in and have a look at some of this stuff. Yeah, it is very funny how the soft light is like the entirety of this. Right, so yeah, there's a soft bluiness to the edge of the lens flare, which is good. That's what we want, or the little glint coming off of his arms, or coming off of his arm. We want that to have a sort of, yeah, like a soft bluiness around the edge. That's often how I gauge some of this stuff. It's a bit of an odd metric to work off of, but it just helps me sort of see how well these are working. Especially on blue tones, blue against white, you should be seeing like a slight bluing around the edge, in my mind at least. So that's what we're getting there. Let me save this, and then I'll put my texture over that. So, right. There's a few bits which are going to have to cut from this because of various weird pauses that I've had to make. And also, you know, loud trucks and stuff moving past the house, which has been happening a lot today for one reason or another. Alright, okay. This is a texture. Let's have a look at this. So, bring it over like that. Then make it an overlay. We're going to want this to be reasonably intense. So let's say, alright, let's incrementally bring it up. Obviously, you don't want it to be 100% because that just destroys our background entirely. So I would say 30% because that's a lot higher than we would normally do recently. So let's see it against the background. Against the background, it sort of lightens up our lighter areas. It just sort of brings up the contrast a little bit. Especially given how intense our gradient maps are, this sort of thing is... I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it definitely helps. And I mean... this is, I suppose, putting our color burn to work here because the color burn is at 10%. I should maybe bump up the luminosity a little bit. Bring up the contrast. 25% on that. You know what, maybe bring that down to 20%. Don't want it to be too high contrast. You want to bring up the contrast. Have this be. I want it to feel like the darker areas are pretty dark and the lighter areas are pretty light. So that sort of gives us that idea. Anyways, that feels like that's us done. This was a fun one, not exactly an easy one, especially given it's the first one I'm doing this week. I have a habit of doing that recently, of giving myself really difficult ones at my first go of the bunch. So yeah, there was a trickier one, not that bad. It could have been a lot worse. It could have definitely been considerably worse. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of blue actually in this batch that I've got going right now. We'll see about that though, I suppose. There's going to be certain ones which are definitely blue. We're going to get a little bit more color variety in that than just blue, but we'll see what we can manage with the blue, because a lot of the characters that I'm doing in the sort of near future, there's a lot of blue going on in them. So I suppose that's a very mild, I suppose, spoiler for the future, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter all that much. I'll sort of figure out something in terms of how to blend those in and get a more than just blue out of it, because obviously this is a very blue one. They're not all going to be this blue. So we'll see what I manage in terms of some of those color palette changes and all that stuff. So yeah, I'll try, and even though there'll be a lot of blue coming up, I'll try and still vary the color palettes within reason. Yeah, this was a fun one, even though it wasn't particularly easy. There was a lot of weird experiments which I was trying with this one, so that's definitely something. I suppose something worth noting is all the weird different things that I tried with this one. Such as like the little effects along the arm and stuff like that, and the little lights, and then the painted time warp and stuff in the background. Not the type of thing which I've been doing a lot of recently, is these weird kind of backgrounds. But you might see a couple of those in the near future. Maybe, who knows? I don't know myself. I didn't know whenever I was doing this one. I didn't know until today that I was going to be doing a weird time warp effect. I just thought it'd be interesting, and I think it is interesting. So yeah, anyways, I've been doing a lot of rambling this time, so I think, with all that said, I'm pretty happy to just call it here. This was a fun one. It was interesting. There was a lot of different weird things that I tried with it, but yeah. So yeah, I'll do my outro, and then I'll leave you, because, before I just spend the rest of the night rambling. It's not even nighttime. But yeah, anyways. If you liked the video, do whatever it is that you normally do, whether that be liking it or not. I would of course prefer if you liked it, but I can't make you do that. I can somewhat influence you into thinking that's a good thing to do, but I mean, that's subjective. It's not going to work on everybody, and I can't exactly exert much in the way of psychological influence. I don't know if I'm that type of person. Anyways, same deal. If you want to subscribe, you can do it. I'd like it if you did it. No biggie. You don't have to. You know where the subscribe button is. You presumably watched a YouTube video before, so you know how that works. So yeah, you can hit the subscribe button. You can smash it if you so choose. But I would feel I feel like it would be morally objectionable to influence that decision in one way or another. So you could. Anyways, before this gets even stranger, I'll continue. If you've got any suggestions for what you'd like to see me draw in the future, you could leave a comment, politely worded. If you don't do it politely worded, just don't do it at all. If you're not going to do it politely, don't do it at all. Just don't waste anyone's time involved here, because I'm just not going to bother doing it if it's not polite. So yeah, anyways. If you choose to watch the next video, I'll see you next time. So with all that said, with truly all of that said, that is us. So I'll say goodbye and I'll leave you. So, bye-bye.